They told us we couldn't come back inside until you arrived. Those were my mother's words, whispered, barely audible, when I found her and my 4-year-old daughter huddled against the side of my own house in December. Zoe's lips were blue. Her tiny body was shaking so hard she couldn't speak. My mother was wearing her indoor coat. No gloves, no scarf. They had been out there for 2 hours. 2 hours, while my husband was inside, music playing, wine open, the house full of warmth and laughter, and a woman in a red dress who had made herself completely at home in my life. If this is your first time here, please subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a story. And drop a comment right now. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Now let's get into part 1. I had been gone for 9 days. 9 days in Atlanta for a regional sales conference that I had not wanted to attend in the first place. I remember the morning I left. Zoe had wrapped both her little arms around my leg and refused to let go, the way only a 4-year-old can, with that total, complete commitment that makes your heart feel like it's being wrung out like a wet cloth. I had peeled her off me gently, kissed her forehead, and told her Mama would be back before she even had time to miss me. I lied, as it turned out. She missed me every single day. My mother, Grace, told me so every night when we spoke on the phone. "She keeps carrying your cardigan around the house," my mother said on day 3. "She says it smells like you." I had laughed, and the laugh had hurt somewhere behind my sternum, the way it does when you're trying not to cry. By day 7, I was done. The conference had wrapped up its major sessions. The remaining 2 days were mostly cocktail hours and networking dinners that I had no interest in. And I had this feeling. I can only describe it as a pull, the kind that starts in your chest and doesn't let up. I wanted to go home. I booked the earliest flight I could find, rescheduled my car service, and told no one. Not Robert, not my mother, not even my assistant. I wanted it to be a surprise. I imagined Zoe's face when she saw me walk through the door. I held on to that image the entire flight home. The taxi pulled onto our street a little after 7 in the evening. The neighborhood was quiet, the way it gets in winter. Everyone tucked inside, lights glowing warm behind curtains. Our house sat at the end of a cul-de-sac, and even from a distance, I could see that something was off. The porch light was dark. Robert always kept the porch light on after 5 o'clock. It was one of his few consistent habits, something he'd started doing after we moved in, and I mentioned I felt uneasy coming home to a dark house. He'd never once forgotten it in 6 years, and yet there it was, dark. I told myself it was nothing, a bulb burned out. I paid the driver, dragged my suitcase up the front walk, and that's when I heard the music. Not faint background music. Loud music, the kind that bumps the floor, the kind that says there are a lot of people inside and nobody is monitoring the volume. Through the front window, I could see light and movement, shapes, a party of some kind. My stomach gave a slow, uneasy roll, and then I heard it, the whimper. I froze. I turned my head. It came again, thin and high from the side of the house, around the corner by the garage. I didn't think, I just moved. I dropped the suitcase handle and I ran. They were tucked against the wall, the two of them. My mother, 67 years old, a woman who had survived things that would flatten most people, sitting on the cold concrete with her knees pulled up, her coat, just her indoor coat, not her heavy winter one, wrapped around my daughter. Zoe's face was pressed into my mother's neck. Her lips, the first thing I saw clearly in the thin light from the neighbor's yard, were blue. Not purple blue, not crisis blue, but that terrible in-between blue that means you've been cold for a very long time and your body is starting to lose the argument. My mother looked up at me, and her face did something I had never seen it do before. She looked relieved and ashamed at the same time, like a person who had been trying to hold something together and was finally, mercifully, allowed to put it down. "Eleanor," she said. Just my name, nothing else. "Mom." I was already gathering Zoe into my arms, already pressing my warm hands against her cold cheeks, already talking to her, telling her, Mama's here, it's okay. Zoe made a sound that was half sob and half my name and burrowed into my chest like she was trying to get back inside me. Her little hands were like ice. How long? I said to my mother. My voice came out flat and strange, the way your voice gets when you're holding something enormous at bay. How long have you been out here? My mother looked at her watch. She had to tilt it to catch the neighbor's light. Almost 2 hours, she said quietly. I stopped moving. I stopped breathing. I looked at my mother's face, the exhaustion in it, the careful way she was holding herself, and something cracked open inside me. Not rage, not yet. Something worse than rage. Something colder. 2 hours, I repeated. They said the house was too crowded. They said we should wait outside until you arrived. She paused. I didn't have my phone. They had asked me to charge it inside when we first got there, and I never got it back. I want you to understand something about my mother. Grace is not a woman who complains. She raised me alone after my father left when I was 9, worked 2 jobs for years without once making me feel like a burden, and has never in her life asked anyone for anything she didn't absolutely need. For her to be sitting on concrete in December telling me this, calmly, quietly, without accusation, meant that whatever had happened inside that house had been bad enough to knock even Grace's dignity sideways. I stood up with Zoe in my arms. Stay here 1 more minute, I told my mother. I went to the front door, unlocked it with my key, and walked into my own home. The noise hit me first, then the smell of food and wine and too many bodies in a warm space. The living room, my living room, was full of people I didn't know. Not just a few people. I counted at least 20 in the first few seconds. Music was playing from the Bluetooth speaker Robert had bought last Christmas. Someone had moved my grandmother's chair, the wingback that I had reupholstered myself, into the corner and piled coats on top of it. There were glasses on every surface. Someone had opened the good wine, the case of Cabernet that Robert and I had been saving. And there, on my couch, sat Patricia, Robert's mother, a woman I had tried, genuinely, patiently, repeatedly tried, to build a relationship with for 6 years. She was sitting in the center of my couch with a glass of red wine in her hand and the posture of a woman who has decided that everything in her line of sight belongs to her. She looked up when I came in. Her expression didn't change. Eleanor, she said, you're back early. Where is my daughter? I said. The words came out very slowly, very carefully, because I needed them to land exactly the way I intended. Where is my 4-year-old daughter right now, Patricia? She tilted her head slightly. Outside. We asked them to give us some space. I want you to understand that I had rehearsed, over the years, many versions of things I might one day say to Patricia. Calm things, firm things, boundary-setting things that the therapist I'd briefly seen had helped me articulate. None of them came to me in that moment. What came to me was a silence so complete that several people nearby stopped talking. You put my 4-year-old child outside, I said, in December. It's not that cold, Patricia said, and took a sip of her wine. Someone in the room laughed. I don't know if it was nervous laughter or genuine laughter, and I have never figured out which would have been worse. I turned around and walked back out. I went to my mother and I helped her up. I carried Zoe inside, my mother walking close behind me. I didn't speak to anyone. I walked straight to the thermostat and turned the heat up. I walked to the kitchen, which had also been commandeered. There were unfamiliar dishes everywhere. Someone had used my good pans, and I started the kettle. Sit, I told my mother, pulling out a kitchen chair. She sat. She was shivering. I hadn't noticed it outside, but inside, in the warmth, her shivering was visible. Zoe hadn't let go of me once. She still had her arms wrapped around my neck. Against my ear, in the smallest voice, she said, "Mama, the lady said I was being too noisy and I needed to go outside." I set the kettle down very carefully. "Which lady, baby?" "The one in the red dress." I didn't know anyone who owned a red dress who should have been in my home, but I stored that information. I filed it away in the part of my mind that was still operating on pure function, the part that was keeping me upright, keeping my voice even, keeping me from doing something I would not regret but might have consequences. I made hot chocolate for Zoe and tea for my mother. Zoe sat in my lap and drank it with both hands wrapped around the mug, the way children do, completely present in the warmth and sweetness of the moment. She had already, in the way of young children, moved past the cold and the fear and was simply here now, leaning into me, humming something under her breath. My mother held her tea with both hands, too. She looked at me over the rim of her cup. "Robert doesn't know you're back," she said. "Where is he?" "Upstairs, in your bedroom." She paused. "With her." The kettle had finished boiling. I had nothing to do with my hands. "How long has this been going on?" I said. Not a question, a calculation. "I only found out tonight," my mother said. "I brought Zoe over because she'd been asking for me all week, and I thought I would stay for dinner. When I got here, the party was already underway. Patricia answered the door. She said Robert had told her she could host." Grace set her cup down carefully. "There was a woman. She was very at home. More at home than I was." I nodded. Something in my chest had gone very quiet. Not numb. I want to be clear about the distinction. Not numb, because I could feel everything. The weight of Zoe on my lap, the warmth of the kitchen, the full and terrible picture assembling itself in my mind with horrible efficiency. Quiet, like the air before a thunderstorm when every leaf goes still. "I'm going upstairs," I said. "Eleanor, I need you to stay here with Zoe." My mother looked at me. She had raised me. She knew the tone. She nodded once. I set Zoe gently in my mother's lap, and I went to the stairs. The music was still going in the living room. Someone was laughing. The party was completely unaware that anything had changed, that the person who owned this house had come home, that the architecture of this evening was about to collapse. I walked up the stairs. I was calm. I want to tell you that I was calm, not because I had forgiven anything or because I was numb, but because somewhere in the last 10 minutes, something had shifted in me with a completeness and a finality that I had never experienced before. I was not going up those stairs to save my marriage. I understood that with a clarity that surprised me. I was going up those stairs because I needed to look Robert in the face. I needed him to understand from my expression that whatever he had believed was going to continue could not and would not. Not one more day. I opened the bedroom door. Robert was sitting on the edge of the bed, and he was not alone. The woman in the red dress, I understood immediately, was sitting in the chair by the window, the chair I used to read in, with her heels on the carpet and a phone in her hand. She looked up. She did not look surprised. She looked inconvenienced. Robert looked up and went very still. He had that expression men get when they have been caught so completely that there is no mechanism available to them for denial. When the distance between what they've been saying and what is actually true collapses into a single, undeniable moment. His face went through about 6 emotions in 2 seconds. I watched them all. "Eleanor," he said, I thought you were back Thursday." "I came home early," I said. "I wanted to surprise my family." He stood up. "Listen, this isn't—" "My mother and my daughter," I said, "were outside, against the side of the house, for 2 hours, in December. Zoe's lips were blue when I found her." The woman in the red dress, whose name I did not yet know, had the decency to look uncomfortable. Robert went pale. Not guilty pale, caught pale. The particular pallor of a person who has just understood that the story they've been telling themselves does not survive contact with the actual facts. "Patricia said," he started. "Patricia told them to go outside because the house was too crowded," I said. "Your mother told my mother and my 4-year-old daughter to wait outside in the cold. And you were up here." I looked at the woman in the chair, back at Robert. "You were up here." "Eleanor, let me explain." I don't need you to explain, I said. I need you to understand what I'm about to tell you. I'm going back downstairs. I'm going to take care of my daughter and my mother. You have 15 minutes to get every person in this house, your mother, this woman, every single guest, out. 15 minutes, Robert, or I will call the police and report an unauthorized gathering in my home. Because this is my home. My name is on this deed. My salary pays this mortgage, and I want them gone. The woman in the red dress stood up. She drew herself up to her full height and said, in a tone that managed to be simultaneously cool and challenging, I don't think you get to give orders here. I looked at her for one long, steady moment. You've been in my bedroom, I said, sitting in my chair, wearing red in my house on a Tuesday in December at a party I wasn't invited to that was thrown in the home I pay for. Say another word and see what happens next. She said nothing. I turned and walked back out. I went downstairs, I sat with Zoe in the kitchen, and I listened to the sounds above me and around me. Movement, voices dropping, the shuffle of people gathering coats and bags. And I held my daughter and stroked her hair and watched the color come back into her face. My mother reached across the kitchen table and put her hand over mine. She'll be all right, she said. I know, I said. So will we. And outside the kitchen window, the December dark pressed against the glass, and inside, the three of us were warm. 15 minutes came and went, and not everyone left. I heard it from the kitchen. The shuffling, the low voices, the sound of the front door opening and closing several times. Coats being retrieved, someone asking where they'd put their keys. The ordinary sounds of a party breaking up. Except that nothing about this night was ordinary, and I sat at my kitchen table with my daughter in my lap and my mother across from me, and I counted every second of it, like a person counting down to something they can't yet name. Robert came to the kitchen doorway at the 12-minute mark. I know it was 12 minutes because I had been watching the clock on the microwave with the focused attention of someone who has decided that precision matters right now, when everything else has gone completely sideways. He stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets and his face arranged into something that was trying to be remorse and landing closer to calculation. I had seen that face before. I just hadn't known what I was looking at until tonight. Most of them are gone, he said. Most, I repeated. My mother is still here. She wants to talk to you. I looked at him for a long moment. Zoe had fallen asleep against my chest, her breathing slow and even, her little body finally warm again. My mother was watching Robert with an expression I can only describe as quiet devastation, the look of a woman who had hoped she was wrong about someone and has just been confirmed right. Patricia can leave with everyone else, I said. I have nothing to say to her tonight. Eleanor, she's my mother, and Zoe is my daughter. I said it quietly because Zoe was sleeping, but I made sure every word arrived. Your mother put our 4-year-old daughter outside in December and left her there for 2 hours. I don't care what she wants to say to me tonight. She can say it through a lawyer. Robert flinched. I watched it happen, that small recoil at the word lawyer. And something told me it was not the first time today the word had crossed his mind. That was interesting. I stored it. Just give me 10 minutes with her, he said. Please. She's upset. She's upset, my mother said. And her voice, Grace's voice, which I had almost never heard carry anything resembling contempt, was ice. Your mother is upset. Robert had the sense not to respond to that. He looked at me. I looked back. 10 minutes, I said, and then I want her out of my house. He disappeared back into the living room. I heard Patricia's voice start up immediately, that particular quality she had of speaking loudly enough to be heard through walls, as if volume were a form of authority. I couldn't make out words yet, just tone, and the tone was not apologetic. My mother leaned forward. Eleanor, she said softly, while you were upstairs, I heard something. Tell me. Patricia was on her phone before the guests started leaving. She was in the hallway. I don't think she knew I could hear her. My mother paused. She pressed her lips together briefly. She said, "It's fine. It's handled. Eleanor is easy. She'll calm down. She always does." I sat with that for a moment. She always does. 6 years of my marriage compressed into 3 words. 3 words that told me exactly what Robert's family had understood about me, that I was manageable, that I could be pushed and locked out and left in the cold, metaphorically and apparently literally, and I would calm down. I would smooth it over. I would do what I always did. They had built an entire architecture of behavior around that assumption, and they had been right until tonight. "She always does," I said out loud, quietly. My mother watched me. "Not anymore," she said. I gently shifted Zoe off my lap and laid her along the kitchen bench with her head on my folded jacket. She didn't wake up. Then I stood, rolled my shoulders back, and walked into the living room. Patricia was standing by the fireplace. The room was empty now except for the 2 of them, her and Robert, who was sitting on the arm of the sofa with his arms crossed, looking like a man who has realized he is in a situation with no exits and is still hoping one will appear. Patricia turned when she heard me come in. She had her full composure back. I had to hand it to her. The woman could compose herself faster than anyone I had ever met. "Eleanor," she said, in the tone she used when she was about to be magnanimous, "I think we all need to take a breath." "I've taken several," I said. "I'm very calm. Say what you want to say." "I want to say that what happened tonight was a misunderstanding. The house was crowded, and I thought Grace and the baby would be more comfortable outside," I said, "in December, with no coats. Grace has a coat. She has an indoor coat, Patricia, the one she was wearing when she came over for dinner, because she didn't know she was going to be spending 2 hours on concrete. Zoe had nothing. She's 4 years old." I held Patricia's gaze. Zoe's lips were blue when I found her. "I want you to understand that I'm not saying this to upset you. I'm saying it because it is what happened in this house tonight, and I want to make sure you understand that I know exactly what happened." Patricia's chin lifted. "You're being dramatic." Robert said, "Mom, I'm being accurate," I said. "There's a difference. Now here's what else I know. The woman in the red dress, I want her name." Silence. "Her name, Robert." He looked at the carpet. "Monica," he said. "Monica. And how long has Monica been coming to my home?" More silence, the kind that answers the question by refusing to answer it. "Long enough to feel comfortable sending my daughter outside," I said. "Long enough that she felt she could speak to me the way she did tonight. Long enough that she knows where the good wine is." I paused. Long enough that Patricia knew about her. Patricia's expression shifted, just slightly, a tightening around the eyes. "You knew," I said to her, not a question. "You've known about Monica. That's why you were comfortable tonight, because this wasn't a secret to you. You've been in on it." I looked at Robert. "How long has your mother known?" He said nothing. "Robert, how long?" "Eleanor, this is not the time. Answer the question." He stood up from the sofa arm, and something in his posture changed. The man who had looked pale and caught upstairs had recalibrated. I could see it happening, that familiar shift I'd watched him make in arguments before, from defensive to offensive, the pivot from apology to attack. "You're never home," he said. "You're gone for weeks at a time. You build your career and you leave me here with our daughter," I said. "With my mother, who comes over to help because I'm working to pay for this house." "Yes, Robert, I do that. And while I do that, you have Monica here, and your mother helps cover it, and my mother and my child get locked outside in the cold. That is the story. Say it differently if you want, but that's the story." Patricia stepped forward. Her voice dropped into a register I hadn't heard from her before. Lower, more deliberate, with something underneath it that it took me a second to identify. Threat. "You need to be careful," she said, "about what you decide to do next. Robert has built things. He has relationships. If you start throwing accusations around, you will not come out of this looking good." I looked at her. I looked at her for a long time. "Are you warning me," I said, "not to pursue legal action?" Because that is a fascinating choice of words, Patricia, from someone who is standing in my living room after a night in which my child was left outside in the cold. I tilted my head. "What is it, exactly, that you're worried I might find?" The room went still. Patricia knew she'd made a mistake. I watched her understand it. The warning had come too fast, too specific, from a woman who was otherwise confident enough in this situation to call me dramatic and tell me to calm down. You don't warn someone off of legal action unless legal action is something to be afraid of. "I want you out of my house," I said. "Tonight. Right now. Robert, walk your mother to the door." "Eleanor, right now." Robert walked his mother to the door. I stood in the middle of my living room and I listened to the murmured conversation between them in the entryway, too low for me to make out words. Then the front door opened. Then it closed. Robert came back alone. He stood at the edge of the room. We looked at each other across it, and I understood, completely and without ambiguity, that we were looking at each other across the ruins of something. Not a fight, a marriage. 6 years of a life. I felt the weight of that. I want to be honest about it. I felt the grief of it, real and sharp underneath everything else. Because whatever Robert had done, I had loved him. I had chosen him. I had built something with him, or tried to, and the knowledge that it had been hollow is not a clean thing. It is a complicated and painful thing that I do not think I will ever fully put down. But grief and clarity are not opposites. They can exist at the same time. And they did in me that night. "How long?" I said again. "I'm not asking for an argument. I'm asking because I need to know what I'm dealing with." He sat down on the couch. He ran a hand over his face. And then, in the way that people sometimes do when the pretense has finally exhausted them, he told me. 14 months. Monica was a colleague. They had met at a conference. The irony of that, a conference, the same mechanism that had sent me to Atlanta, the same kind of event that had kept me away while this was being constructed. She was 31. She worked in his department. Patricia had met her at a work function 8 months ago and had, as Robert put it, gotten along with her. "Your mother got along with her," I said. "Your mother got along with the woman you were having an affair with while you were married to me." "My mother didn't think, she thought things between us were..." "Were what, Robert?" He was quiet. "Say it." "She thought things between us were over, in all but name." I absorbed that. Your mother thought your marriage was over in all but name, and so she welcomed the replacement, and she made herself comfortable, and tonight she hosted a party in your home and put your wife's mother and your 4-year-old daughter outside because the other woman was inside and it was too crowded. That was the logic. That was the chain of events, clear as anything. "I see," I said. "Eleanor, I'm going to bed. You can sleep in the guest room." "I don't think we should leave things like this tonight. I think we need to talk. Robert," my voice was very quiet. "I found my daughter with blue lips tonight. I found my mother shaking. I've been awake since 4 this morning. I've been on 2 planes, and I have just spent an hour managing the fallout from a situation you created. I am going to bed. We will talk when I am ready to talk. And when we do," I looked at him steadily, "you are going to tell me everything. The money, the accounts, everything that Patricia didn't want me looking at. Because that warning she gave me wasn't about the affair." I paused. "Affairs don't require warnings. Financial crimes do." Robert went very still. I left him sitting there. I checked on Zoe, still asleep on the kitchen bench, peaceful and pink-cheeked now, her little mouth soft. I kissed her forehead. I went to my mother and I told her she was sleeping in our guest room, or rather in the room that was now Robert's, and I would move him to the sofa. My mother looked at me with those clear gray eyes and said, "I'm staying whether you tell me to or not." And I smiled for the first time in hours because that, at least, that steadiness, that reliability had not changed tonight. I moved Robert's things to the sofa. He didn't argue. I went upstairs. I stood in my bedroom, the room where Monica had been sitting in my chair 3 hours ago, and I looked around it. I changed the sheets. I opened the window a crack because the room felt close and wrong. I sat on the edge of the bed, and I took my phone out of my bag. I had 3 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. They had all come in within the last 40 minutes, since I'd been home. Since Robert and Patricia both knew I was back. I didn't call back. I took a screenshot and I texted it to my lawyer, Diane Chen, who had been my lawyer for 4 years and who answered her phone at 10:30 at night when I called her, because that was the kind of woman Diane was. "I need to talk to you tomorrow," I said when she picked up. "First available. I think there may be more here than just the affair." Diane was quiet for 3 seconds. "What kind of more?" she said. "Patricia warned me off legal action tonight. Not in a general way, in a specific way, like there was something specific to be afraid of." Another silence. "Are your financials separate or joint?" "Joint account," I said, "and a joint business credit card for Robert's work expenses." "Get your bank app open tonight," Diane said. "Check the last 6 months. Don't move anything. Don't touch anything. Just look. And send me screenshots of anything that looks irregular." "Okay. And Eleanor, whatever you find, don't confront him with it yet. Not tonight. Will you do that for me?" "Yes," I said. "Good." A pause. "Are you and Zoe safe tonight?" The question hit me somewhere unexpected. Not because I was afraid. I wasn't, not in that way. But because it had not occurred to me until that moment that the question needed to be asked. That the night had escalated to a place where my lawyer needed to ask if I was safe. "Yes," I said. "My mother's here." "Okay. 9 o'clock tomorrow. My office." She paused again. "You're doing the right things, Eleanor." I hung up. I opened the banking app. I went back 6 months, the way Diane had said. And then I sat very still for a very long time, because the numbers I was looking at did not make sense, not in the way that accounting errors don't make sense, in the way that money disappearing in regular increments, in round numbers, over a period of 8 months from an account that was supposed to be a joint household account does not make sense unless someone has been moving it with intention, with planning, with the expectation that the other person on the account would not look too closely. "She always does," Patricia had said. "She always calms down." I opened my screenshot folder. I started documenting every transaction. My hands were steady. My breathing was even. Outside, the December wind moved against the window, and somewhere downstairs, the house I had paid for, the house I had built a life in, was quiet. And I was nowhere close to done. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I lay in the dark and stared at the ceiling and let my mind do what it needed to do, which was to go through every transaction I had photographed, every number, every date, and try to build a picture from the pieces. By 2 in the morning, I had 11 pages of screenshots. By 3, I had a timeline. By 4, when the first gray light started coming through the window, I had a number: $63,000. Gone from our joint account over 8 months in transfers that were labeled with almost insulting vagueness as business expenses and consulting fees, and twice simply transfer. $63,000 that I had earned, deposited, trusted to a shared account, and never once thought to check on, because I had been busy, because I had been working, because I had been, in the language Patricia had apparently used to dismiss me, easy. I got up at 5:30. I showered, dressed, and went downstairs. Robert was asleep on the sofa with one arm over his face, and I walked past him to the kitchen without waking him. I made coffee. I sat at the table where I had sat the night before with Zoe in my lap, and I opened my laptop and I started building a document. Every transaction, every date, every inconsistency. Diane had told me not to confront him, and I wouldn't, but I was not going to walk into her office at 9 o'clock with nothing but screenshots and a feeling. I was going to walk in with a case. My mother came downstairs at 6:15. She took one look at me, at the laptop, at the coffee, at the expression on my face, and she went directly to the coffee maker without saying a word. She poured herself a cup and sat down across from me. She was the only person in the world I could have tolerated in that kitchen at that moment. "How bad?" she said. $63,000, I said. She was quiet for a moment. "From the joint account." "Yes." "Over how long?" 8 months. It started 2 months after Monica. I closed the laptop. He's been moving money out for almost as long as the affair has been going on, which means it wasn't impulsive. It was a plan. My mother wrapped both hands around her mug. "He was building an exit," she said. The words landed with a weight that I hadn't quite given them yet in all my hours of staring at numbers. An exit. Not just an affair. Not just a man who had lost his way and found someone new. A man who had been quietly, methodically, constructing a door out of our life together, while I was away building the income he was quietly draining. The scale of it, the coldness of it, was something I had to sit with for a moment before I could respond. "Yes," I said, "I think so." Robert appeared in the kitchen doorway at 6:45. He looked like a man who had slept badly on a sofa and knew it was the least he deserved. He looked at me. He looked at my mother. He looked at the laptop. "Coffee?" I said. He blinked. I think the normality of the offer disoriented him. "Sure," he said carefully and moved toward the coffee maker. I watched him pour it. He was wearing yesterday's clothes. His hair was uncombed. He looked diminished, and I noted, with something that was not quite satisfaction and not quite sadness, that I felt nothing about that. No softening, no instinct to help him. The part of me that had spent 6 years managing his feelings and smoothing his moods had apparently clocked out sometime between 1 and 4 in the morning and left no forwarding address. He sat down at the table, not next to me, at the end, like a person who knows they are a visitor. "I want to talk," he said. "Not now," I said. "I have a 9 o'clock. "With who?" "My lawyer." He went still. The coffee cup stopped halfway to his mouth. "Eleanor." "Robert." My voice was even. "You had 14 months. You had 14 months to make different choices, and you made the ones you made. I am not interested in a conversation right now whose purpose is to talk me out of the consequences. If you want to have a real conversation, honest, complete, including the finances, I am willing to do that, but not this morning and not without Diane in the room." He set the cup down. "You know about the money." It wasn't a question. He was looking at my laptop, at the closed screen, and he had done the math the same way I had done the math, and he knew. "I know about the money," I said. The silence that followed was a specific kind of silence, not the silence of someone about to confess, the silence of someone rapidly recalculating how much I knew, how much I could prove, what move was available to him now that this particular variable had changed. I had been married to this man for 6 years. I knew how he thought when he was cornered. He went quiet, and he calculated, and then he moved. And usually, by the time he moved, I had already exhausted myself trying to keep the peace, and I was willing to accept less than I should have. Not today. "I can explain the transfers," he started. "I'm sure you can," I said pleasantly. "Save it for the deposition." I got up, rinsed my cup, picked up my bag and my laptop, kissed my mother on the top of her head, and walked out of the kitchen. I checked on Zoe, still asleep, still warm, one arm thrown over her stuffed rabbit, and then I drove to Diane's office. Diane Chen was 54 years old, and she had been doing family law for 26 of those years. She had a way of listening that made you feel like everything you said was being cataloged and cross-referenced in real time, which was, in fact, exactly what was happening. I laid out everything on her conference table, the screenshots, the timeline, the document I'd built, the things Patricia had said, the specific phrasing of the warning. Diane listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for about 10 seconds. Then she said, "Tell me about Robert's job." He's a senior financial manager at Callaway Group, I said. He manages 3 mid-level investment accounts and has signing authority on a departmental expense account. Diane looked at the transfer records. And these consulting fees? He doesn't have any consultants, I said. He never has. His department doesn't use outside consultants. It's all in-house. Diane nodded slowly. Eleanor, I want to bring in someone I work with. His name is Frank Guerrero. He does forensic accounting primarily for divorce cases, but also for fraud. She paused. I think what you're looking at here may not be limited to the household account. I heard what she was saying. You think he's been doing the same thing at work. I think the pattern of transfers, the regularity, the round numbers, the vague labeling, is not the pattern of someone who impulsively moved money because they needed cash for an affair. This is organized. And if someone has the organizational habit to do this in their personal finances, and they have access to larger pools of money professionally, she let the sentence finish itself. I sat back in my chair. He's been embezzling from Callaway. I'm not saying that yet, Diane said carefully. Frank will tell us what the numbers say, but I want him on this today, if you're willing. She looked at me directly. Eleanor, if this is what it looks like, you need to be very careful about how you proceed. The minute Robert suspects you're looking at his professional finances, things will move fast. He may try to remove assets. He may try to get ahead of it at work. He already knows I have the household records, I said. I told him this morning I'd see him at the deposition. Diane closed her eyes briefly, not in frustration, in the particular expression of a lawyer whose client has said something very human and not entirely strategically optimal. Okay, she said. Then we move fast. Frank Guerrero was in Diane's office by 11. He was a small, quiet man with reading glasses he kept taking off and putting back on. And he looked at numbers the way some people look at music, with an attention that was almost affectionate. He took my documentation, went through it in about 8 minutes, and then said, "This is a skeleton. I need the actual account statements, all of them, and I need access to Robert's employment records, if we can get them." He looked at Diane. "If he's doing this at home with this level of organization, your instinct is probably right." I drove home to get the account records. I had the passwords. Robert and I had always shared them. Another thing I had trusted. Another door I had left unlocked. I pulled everything I needed, uploaded it to a secure link Diane's office sent me, and was back in the car when my phone rang. Unknown number again. The same one that had called 3 times the night before. I answered it. A woman's voice. Smooth, controlled, with just an edge of something underneath that she was working to suppress. "Is this Eleanor?" "Who is this?" "My name is Monica." A pause, designed for impact. "I think we should talk." I sat in the car in my own driveway and looked at the house in front of me and said nothing for 5 full seconds. "Why would I want to do that?" I said. "Because there are things about Robert that you don't know yet," she said. "Things that will affect you. Things that will affect your daughter." Another pause. "I'm not your enemy, Eleanor. I know how that sounds, but I'm not." "You were in my bedroom last night," I said. "In my chair." "I know." Her voice changed slightly. Something real came into it, something that sounded like it might have been genuine discomfort. "I know that. And I know that what happened to your mother and your daughter last night was wrong. I want you to know, I didn't know they were outside. I didn't know until it was already... I was upstairs. Patricia didn't tell me." I processed that. The information itself was less significant to me than the fact that she was offering it, volunteering a detail that separated her from Patricia, that positioned her as someone with a conscience, someone who had lines even if they were drawn in strange places. She was distinguishing herself. She wanted something. "What do you want to tell me, Monica?" A breath. "Not on the phone. Can we meet?" "Why?" "Because I have documents," she said. "Copies of transfers from his work account. Robert has been... I found out 2 months ago. I didn't know what to do with it. I told him to stop, and he told me it was handled. And then last night happened, and I realized..." Her voice caught. "I realized I'm not the person I thought I was in this situation. I thought I was just... I was wrong about a lot of things. I gripped the steering wheel. A woman who had been sleeping with my husband for 14 months, who had been in my home, who had been comfortable enough in my space to speak to me the way she had the night before, was calling me to give me evidence against him. The universe, I thought, had a very particular sense of timing. "Coffee shop on Meridian," I said. 1 o'clock. Come alone. I called Diane from the parking lot. She said, "Go. Bring your phone, record everything she says with her knowledge and consent, get the documents if they're real, and do not offer her anything in return." Then she said, "Eleanor, I need you to understand. This is either the most useful thing that's happened or it's a setup. Be careful." "I know," I said. I got there early. I got a table in the back, ordered tea I didn't drink, and waited. Monica walked in at 1:03. Without the red dress, without the context of my home, she was just a woman in her early 30s who looked like she hadn't slept. She spotted me, came over, sat down. She put a manila envelope on the table between us and kept her hand on it. "I want to say something first," she said. "Okay. What happened to your daughter last night?" "I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that if I had known they were outside, I would have opened that door myself." She looked at me steadily. "Patricia told me they'd gone home. She lied to me too." I looked at her. "Why are you here, Monica?" She slid the envelope across the table. "Because 2 months ago I found copies of transfer authorizations on Robert's laptop while he was in the shower. I should have gone to the police then. I didn't. I told him I knew, and he told me it was a short-term borrowing situation, that he was going to replace the money, that it was under control." She paused. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. And then last night, watching Patricia lock that little girl out of the house like she was nothing, I realized I had been choosing to be blind. And I'm done. I opened the envelope. 6 pages. Transfer authorizations from Callaway Group's departmental account, signed with Robert's credentials, made out to 2 shell companies I had never heard of. The amounts were not small. We were not talking about thousands. We were talking about a number with 6 figures before the decimal point. I looked up at Monica. "How much does he have?" "Including what he moved from your household account, and I found records of that too. He kept everything on the same laptop. He was unbelievably careless. I think close to $200,000 total." $200,000. I heard it and felt the floor shift under me, even though I was sitting down, even though I was already prepared for something bad. $200,000. Built over what I now understood was nearly 2 years of systematic theft from his employer and his wife, stockpiled somewhere I hadn't known to look, while I had been traveling and working and trusting. "He was going to leave," I said. Not a question. "Yes," Monica said quietly. "He talked about it. Moving somewhere new, starting over. He made a lot of things sound like something they weren't." She looked down at her coffee. "I thought I was the person he was going to start over with. I'm not sure that was ever true." We sat for a moment with that. "The documents are copies," she said. "The originals are on his laptop, which is at your house. If you can get to it before he does—" I was already texting my mother. "Get Robert's laptop from the office. Put it in my closet. Do not tell him." My mother texted back 4 minutes later. "Done." I looked at Monica across the table. This woman who had been in my bedroom, my chair, my life, who was sitting across from me now with dark circles under her eyes and 6 pages of documents that were going to change everything. I had imagined this meeting differently, in the abstract, in the way you imagine a confrontation with someone who has wronged you. I had imagined anger. I had imagined a version of myself who said devastating things with perfect precision. But she was just a person who had also been lied to, who had made wrong choices while being deceived, and who had, at the moment that mattered, chosen to do the right thing. I did not forgive her. I want to be clear about that. Forgiveness is a separate conversation from usefulness, and right now she was very useful. But I did not feel the heat toward her that I had expected. I felt it toward Robert, and toward Patricia, who had lied to everyone in the room, including the woman she'd supposedly welcomed. Is there anything else? I said. Monica reached into her bag and put a small USB drive on the table. His email archive, she said. I don't know everything that's on it, but I know some of it involves Patricia. She paused. She knew about the financial fraud. She told him which accounts to use because she knew the audit cycle at Callaway. She used to work there, 20 years ago, but she knew the system. Patricia, who had warned me off legal action, who had said those words with a specific, targeted precision that I had recognized as threat before I understood why. Patricia, who had not just covered for her son's affair, but had actively helped him build the mechanism to escape his life, his wife, his child. I picked up the USB drive and put it in my coat pocket. Thank you, I said to Monica. And I meant it, exactly as much as was appropriate, which was not very much, and also more than nothing. I drove directly to Diane's office. I put the envelope and the drive on her conference table. Frank Guerrero, who was still there, looked at the transfer authorizations and said, quietly, "There it is." Diane picked up her phone and made a call I was not privy to, stepping out of the room, and when she came back, she said, "I have a contact at Callaway's legal department. I've worked with them before. They will want to know about this tonight." She looked at me. "Eleanor, this is going to move very fast from here. Once Callaway's lawyers get involved, Robert is going to lose his job within days, maybe hours. And once that happens, he's going to know that the walls are closing in." "What do I need to do?" I said. "Go home," she said. "Act normal. Don't let him know how much you have. And tomorrow morning, when Zoe is somewhere safe and your mother is with you, serve him." I drove home in the dark. The house was lit, warm, and ordinary. Robert was in the kitchen making dinner, the way he sometimes did on weekday evenings, as if this were any evening in our life and nothing had changed. He looked up when I came in. He had a careful, watchful expression that he was trying to dress as normalcy. "How was your day?" he said. "Fine," I said. "How was yours?" "Fine," he said. I hung up my coat with the USB drive still in the pocket, and I went to find my daughter. That night, I made dinner for Zoe and my mother, and I sat at the table and I watched Robert move around my kitchen like a man who believed he still belonged there, and I said nothing. I passed the salt when he asked for it. I answered Zoe's questions about whether penguins could live in our backyard. I poured water. I was completely, utterly, terrifyingly normal, and every second of it cost me something I don't have a word for. Zoe went to bed at 8. I read her 2 chapters of her book, the one about the girl who discovers a door in her grandmother's garden, and she fell asleep before the 2nd chapter ended, with her hand curled in mine on top of the blanket. I sat in the dark of her room for a few minutes longer than I needed to. I listened to her breathe. I thought about her lips, blue in the December dark, 24 hours ago, and I let myself feel it fully. That terror, that particular kind of fury that only a mother can understand, the kind that doesn't cool down and doesn't negotiate and doesn't care about strategy or timing or what's legally advisable. I let it move through me like a current, and then I put it somewhere I could reach it when I needed it. Then I went to bed. Or rather, I went to the bedroom, closed the door, and spent 2 hours on my phone with Diane going through the documents Monica had given us, piece by piece. Diane had already spoken to her contact at Callaway. His name was Stephen Rourke, and he was the company's head of internal compliance. And according to Diane, he had gone very quiet when she described the transfer authorizations, and then said he needed to make some calls. Diane said, "He didn't sound surprised, Eleanor. He sounded like a man who had suspected something and just found out he was right." That told me everything I needed to know about how fast this was going to move. "Tomorrow morning," Diane said again, "have Grace take Zoe somewhere. Make sure you have copies of everything stored in 3 separate places, not just your phone. And when the process server arrives, you need to be somewhere Robert can't come at you immediately, somewhere public or with a witness." "My mother will be there," I said. "Good." A pause. "How are you doing?" It was such a human question, inserted so matter-of-factly into the machinery of legal strategy, that it took me off guard. "I'm holding," I said. "That's enough for tonight," she said. "Get some sleep." I didn't sleep, but I rested, which is a different thing, and sometimes has to be enough. Robert knocked on the bedroom door at 10:30. I said, "I'm asleep," which we both knew was a lie, and he said through the door, "Eleanor, I just want you to know, I'm going to fix this." I said nothing. After a moment, I heard him walk back down the hall to the guest room, and the quiet that followed was enormous and complete. I thought about that phrase, "I'm going to fix this." Of all the things Robert had said to me in the last 24 hours, that one told me the most. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "I was wrong." "I'm going to fix this." As if the thing that had happened were a logistical problem rather than a moral one, as if the solution were organizational rather than human. He was still thinking in terms of management, still calculating, and the fact that he thought it was fixable at all told me he still did not understand how much I knew. Good. I needed him not to understand that. For about 8 more hours. I was up at 5 again. I moved quietly. My mother was already in the kitchen when I came down. I would never stop being grateful for Grace's instinct to be present at exactly the moment she was needed. And she looked up at me with that clear, steady look and said simply, "What do you need me to do?" "Take Zoe to your house after breakfast," I said. "Don't tell Robert where you're going. If he asks, you're taking her to the park. Stay at your house until I call you." "Okay." She poured my coffee without being asked. "Is it today?" "It's today." She nodded. She didn't ask for more detail. She didn't say "be careful" or "are you sure" or any of the things that would have made me feel uncertain, which was why Grace was Grace. She just said, "Then eat something. You'll need it." I forced down toast. Robert came downstairs at 7. He was dressed for work, pressed shirt, jacket, the performance of an ordinary workday. He looked at my mother getting Zoe ready to go out, and he looked at me at the kitchen table, and something moved behind his eyes that I couldn't read completely. Suspicion, maybe. Or maybe just the low-grade anxiety of a person who knows the ground has shifted and can't yet locate exactly where the new fault lines are. "Where are you taking her?" he asked my mother. "For a walk," my mother said, without looking up from buttoning Zoe's coat. "Fresh air." He looked at me. "Are you working from home today?" "I'm going out," I said. "I have some errands." He accepted that, or he appeared to. He poured his coffee, stood at the counter with it, scrolled his phone, and I watched him from the corner of my eye and timed my breathing and thought, 8 hours ago you were still managing this. You were still in control of the narrative. You had no idea that in about 45 minutes, your employer's internal compliance team was going to receive a formal report, and your wife's lawyer was going to file for divorce with a financial misconduct addendum. And the man you have been for 14 months was going to start becoming visible to everyone who had only seen the version you'd been showing them. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Diane. "Process server is en route. ETA 9:15. Be ready." I turned my phone face down. Robert set his coffee cup in the sink, picked up his bag, and said, "I'll be home by 6. Like a man who believed he would be. Like a man who thought this was still a day that would end in his living room, in his life, in the ordinary rhythms of an existence that remained intact. "Okay," I said. He left. I sat at the table for 60 seconds. Then I picked up my phone and called Diane. "He just left," I said. "Good," she said. "The process server will be there at 9:15, as I said. Frank has sent the financial report to Rourke at Callaway. It went out at 8. And Eleanor, Frank found something this morning that wasn't in the documents Monica gave us." My stomach tightened. "What?" "There's a third account," Diane said. "Not connected to your joint account and not connected to Callaway. It's a personal investment account in Robert's name only, opened 14 months ago. Same month the affair started. Frank tracked it through a transfer reference number in the Callaway records. He put the $200,000 in there. 14 months ago, the same month. He had opened the account and started the affair in the same month, and I did not think that was a coincidence. I thought that was a man who had made a decision and then arranged all the pieces at once. Not a man who fell into something, a man who planned a departure. "How do we get to the account?" I said. "Freeze motion," Diane said. "I've already filed for an emergency asset freeze as part of the divorce petition. A judge is reviewing it this morning. If it goes through, and Frank believes it will given the fraud element, Robert will not be able to touch that money. And if he tries to move it before the freeze goes through, that's why I'm telling you now," Diane said. "If you see anything on your banking apps, any movement at all, call me immediately. Don't wait. Call me." I hung up. I checked the joint account. Nothing moved. Not yet. My mother left with Zoe at 8:45. Zoe wrapped herself around my legs at the door in that total, committed way she had, and I held her for a moment longer than usual, longer than a see you tonight hug warranted. And she looked up at my face with those clear eyes that missed nothing and said, "Are you sad, Mama?" "No, baby," I said. "I'm going to be fine." She studied me. 4 years old, with the unnerving, perceptive accuracy of children who have not yet learned to look away from what they see. "Promise?" "I promise." She seemed to accept that. She took my mother's hand and walked out the door. And I watched them go down the front walk, and then I closed the door and stood alone in my house for the first time since I'd come home. The process server arrived at 9:12. A woman, which surprised me slightly. I don't know what I'd expected. She was efficient and professional, and it took under 3 minutes. Divorce petition, financial misconduct addendum, emergency asset freeze application, and a notice of intent to subpoena employment records from Callaway Group. She handed me my copy and left. I stood in my own hallway and held the papers, and understood that what I was feeling was not triumph and was not grief, but something that lived precisely between them, the specific feeling of a door closing on a room you thought was your home, and finding out it was never quite what it looked like. Robert called at 9:47. I let it ring. He called again. I let it ring again. Then a text, "Eleanor, call me right now." Then another, "What have you done?" Then another, 30 seconds later, with a different tone entirely. Less anger, something raw underneath it. "Please." I texted Diane. "He's been served." She texted back, "Good. Don't take his calls yet. Let him sit with it." At 10:15, my phone rang, and it was not Robert. It was a number I recognized after a second as belonging to Patricia, from the one time she had called me directly to, as she had put it, discuss some concerns she had about how I was managing my household. I had saved the number and labeled it exactly as I thought of it. "Do not accommodate." I answered it. Because today was different. Today, I wanted to hear what Patricia had to say. "You have made," Patricia said without preamble, "a very serious mistake." "Good morning, Patricia," I said. "Don't play games with me. I know what you've filed. Robert called me. Do you have any idea what you've done to this family?" "I've filed for divorce," I said, "and I've reported financial fraud to Robert's employer. Which part are you calling about?" A pause, and then Patricia's voice, dropping into that register I'd heard once before in my living room, that specific, deliberate threat tone. "If you pursue this, I will make sure that you lose custody of that child. I have connections, Eleanor, and I will use every single one of them to show a family court that you are an absent mother who prioritizes her career over her daughter." I sat down slowly on the bottom stair. I let the words land. I let myself feel them, the cold ugliness of them, the calculated targeting of the one thing she knew would hurt most. And then I took a breath. "Patricia," I said, "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to hear it clearly." My voice was very calm. "Last night, the night before last, my 4-year-old daughter was outside in December with blue lips because you put her there. I have a witness. I have my mother's testimony. I have the temperature records for that evening, and I have, from a source I will not name, documentation that connects you directly to Robert's financial fraud at Callaway, because you knew the audit cycle there, and you told him which accounts to use. I paused. So when you talk to me about custody and connections, I need you to consider what a family court judge will do with a grandmother who locked a 4-year-old outside in winter to make room for her son's mistress. Think carefully about your next sentence. Silence. The longest silence I had ever heard from Patricia, who filled silence the way water fills a container, automatically and completely. "Where did you get that?" she said finally. Her voice had changed. The authority had gone out of it. "Does it matter?" I said. "Who talked to you?" It wasn't a question about information anymore. It was a question about betrayal. She was running through the list of people who knew, and I watched her, through the phone, arrive at the name. Monica. The word came out very flat. I said nothing. "That girl," Patricia said, and the contempt in her voice was extraordinary, "has no idea what she's done. She has no idea who she's dealing with." "Neither did I said. "For 6 years, neither did I. We have that in common." I stood up. "Goodbye, Patricia. The next time we speak, it will be through our respective lawyers." I hung up. I sat on the bottom stair for a moment. My hands were completely steady, and my heart was beating very fast, and I thought, this is what it feels like to be finished being afraid of someone. It doesn't feel like victory. It feels like altitude, like the moment you get high enough that the weather you've been living inside is below you, and you can see the shape of it for the first time. My phone rang again. Not Robert, not Patricia, an Atlanta area code I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer it, but something made me. "Is this Eleanor Marsh?" A man's voice, professional, careful. "Yes. My name is Stephen Rourke. I'm the head of compliance at Callaway Group. I believe you know why I'm calling." "I do," I said. "I've reviewed the report your forensic accountant sent this morning. I want to be straightforward with you. The material he sent us confirmed something we had begun to suspect internally about 6 weeks ago. We had a preliminary audit flag that we hadn't yet been able to source. Now we have the source." A pause. "I'm calling as a courtesy because the documents suggest you were also a victim of this. Robert Marsh will be suspended from his position effective today, pending a full investigation. We will be cooperating fully with any legal proceedings. I want you to know that." I closed my eyes. "Thank you," I said. "One more thing," Rourke said. "There's a name in the documents that I want to ask you about. Patricia Marsh. Are you aware of her involvement?" "Yes," I said. "She worked at Callaway 20 years ago. I'm told she provided information about the audit cycle." Rourke was quiet for a moment. "She did work here. She was let go 22 years ago. The reason for her termination was," another pause, measured and deliberate, "an internal financial irregularity that was handled quietly at the time, at the request of a board member she had a relationship with. It was never formally prosecuted." He let that settle. It would appear that apple didn't fall far. I sat with that. Patricia, 22 years ago, had done what Robert had done and had walked away clean, and had carried that knowledge for 2 decades, the knowledge of which doors were unlocked, which systems had gaps, which audit cycles could be gamed, and had given it to her son as if it were a tool, as if it were an inheritance. "Thank you, Mr. Rourke," I said. "Truly." I called Diane immediately. She listened to everything, and by the time I finished, she said, "Eleanor, I need you to understand what this means. Patricia's prior termination from Callaway, if it was for the same type of irregularity, means she may be charged not just as an accessory, but as a co-conspirator. This is not a divorce case anymore. This is a criminal matter." "I know," I said. "Are you okay?" I thought about it genuinely for a moment before answering. "I will be," I said. At 2 p.m, Robert came home. He had been suspended from Callaway and escorted from the building at 11 that morning, and whatever remained of the composure he'd been maintaining had not survived that. He came through the front door and he looked at me in the kitchen, and he was a man I almost didn't recognize. Not because he looked so different, but because the version of him I had known, the constructed, managed, strategic version, was gone. What was left was just a person who had run out of moves. Eleanor, he said. His voice was completely different. All the control had left it. I need you to listen to me. I'm listening, I said. I know there's nothing I can say that fixes this. I know that. But Zoe, I need you to know that everything I did, I told myself it was for her future. I know it sounds like what it is, I said quietly. A story you told yourself so you didn't have to see what you were actually doing. He flinched. I love my daughter. I know you do, I said. And I believed it, which was the most painful and complicated part of all of it. That love and betrayal were not opposites. That a person could be genuinely devoted to a child and still be capable of everything Robert had done. Which is why you are going to cooperate with every part of this process. You're going to be honest in the proceedings, you're going to support Zoe financially, and you're going to let me take care of her without interference. Because you know, Robert, look at me. You know that I am the one who was here. I am the one who earned the money that kept this house. I am the one who came home from Atlanta early because I missed her. And you know what I found. He looked at me. His eyes were wet. I did not feel softened by that. I felt the truth of it, that he was in pain, real pain. And I also held the truth of December, concrete and blue lips, and $63,000, and $200,000, and Monica and Patricia, and 22 years of a pattern that had been handed down like a skill. I know, he said. I know what you found. Good, I said. Then we understand each other. He went upstairs. I heard the bedroom door close. And then, after a while, I heard something I had not expected to hear from Robert in all the years of our marriage. I heard him cry. Not quietly. The way a person cries when there is no performance left in them and nothing between them and the fact of what they have done. I stood in my kitchen and I listened, and I did not go to him. That part of me was closed now, and it had closed not in cruelty but in necessity, the way a wound closes, not to deny that it was once open, but because closing is what allows healing to begin. My mother called at 3.
We're at the park, she said. Zoe found a dog and has decided she is keeping it. The owner disagrees. I laughed, actually laughed, a real one, the first since Atlanta. Tell her we'll talk about a dog. Will we? I looked around my kitchen, my house, my name on the deed, my salary, my choices, my daughter's whole wonderful consuming future, in the house I was going to keep and fill with warmth every December for the rest of her childhood. Yes, I said, we will. The weeks that followed moved the way major life events always do, both impossibly fast and unbearably slow at the same time, depending on which part of it you were living inside. The legal machinery moved fast. The emotional reckoning moved at its own pace, indifferent to deadlines and court dates and the clean procedural language of attorneys. Robert was formally suspended from Callaway the day he was served. By the end of that same week, the suspension became a termination. Work called Diane to confirm it, and Diane called me, and I sat in my car in a parking lot and listened to the words and felt something I had not expected to feel, which was not satisfaction and not relief, but a deep, tired sorrow for the waste of it all. A man with real intelligence, real ability, real opportunity, who had chosen to steal, who had looked at a life I had helped build and decided it wasn't enough, and instead of saying so, had taken an exit through a door he constructed out of other people's money and other people's trust. The waste of it. That was what sat heaviest. Diane filed for the emergency asset freeze, and it was granted within 48 hours. The $200,000 in Robert's private investment account went nowhere. His lawyer called Diane and called it overreach, and Diane sent back a 4-page response that I was told was so precise and so thoroughly documented that his lawyer asked for 3 days to review it before responding. She granted 2. Patricia hired her own lawyer, which told me everything about how seriously she was taking the criminal exposure. Her lawyer was expensive. I recognized the firm's name from local news coverage of a white-collar case 2 years prior. And the fact that she'd retained him within 4 days of the compliance report going to Callaway
told me that Patricia had made a phone call the moment she realized what was coming. She had prepared for this possibility. Maybe not this exact shape of it, but something like it. People who do what Patricia had done once, who walk away clean once, carry in them the knowledge that it might not go clean a second time. She had been ready for a version of this day. What she had not been ready for was Monica. Diane told me on a Thursday morning that Monica had agreed to provide a formal witness statement. I did not call Monica to thank her. I thought about it and decided the appropriate distance was the appropriate distance. And we were not, and would never be, friends. But I held what she had done, the choice she had made at personal cost when she could have stayed quiet, and I respected it in the private, unspoken way you respect a difficult thing without needing to make it into something warmer than it was. Monica's statement, combined with Frank Guerrero's forensic report and the Callaway compliance records, built a case that even Robert's lawyer eventually told him, according to Diane, was not survivable at trial. The words Diane used when she relayed this to me were, his counsel advised him that cooperation was his only viable option, which was attorney language for, he has no moves left. Robert called me on a Sunday evening, 3 weeks after I had served him. I was in the kitchen with Zoe, who was attempting, with enormous seriousness and very little success, to make pancakes. My mother was supervising, with the particular expression of a woman who has decided the outcome is less important than the experience. I stepped into the hallway. I want to talk, he said. Not through lawyers, just, I need to say something to you directly. Say it, I said. A pause. I'm going to cooperate with everything. The Callaway case, the divorce proceedings, all of it. I'm not going to fight the asset division. I'm not going to contest custody. Another pause. Longer. I need you to know that what happened to Zoe that night, what my mother did, I didn't know. I was upstairs and I didn't know, and I know that doesn't fix it. I know I was upstairs, and that's its own thing I have to live with. But I need you to know I didn't tell her to do that. I leaned against the hallway wall. From the kitchen, I could hear Zoe saying with great authority that the batter needed more sugar, and my mother saying with equal authority that it did not. And the small, familiar music of the two of them together, which had been playing in my life for 4 years, and which I intended to protect with every tool available to me. I believe you, I said to Robert, that you didn't tell her to do it. But Robert, you created the conditions that made it possible. You brought Monica into our home, into our life, and you let your mother believe that our marriage was over in all but name. And so she acted from that belief. The conditions were yours. He was quiet for a long moment. I know, he said, I know that. Then you know why things have to go the way they're going to go. Yes, he said, and he sounded, for the first time in all of this, like a man who had stopped calculating and was just standing in the truth of what he had done. Can you tell Zoe that I love her? You don't have to tell her from me specifically, just that she's loved. Something moved in my chest, not softness toward Robert, softness toward Zoe, on her behalf, the tenderness of knowing that her father, whatever he had done to me, still loved her in the way he was capable of loving, which was imperfect and compromised, but real. She knows, I said. I've made sure she knows. He said thank you, and he hung up, and I stood in the hallway for a moment before going back to the kitchen, where Zoe had apparently won the sugar argument, and the batter was now, by my mother's assessment, irreparably sweet. It'll be fine, I said, and kissed the top of Zoe's head, and took over the pan. The criminal case against Patricia moved with a momentum that surprised even Diane. The combination of Monica's statement, the forensic records, and Work's confirmation that Patricia's prior termination from Callaway had involved the same type of account manipulation, quietly buried for 22 years, now suddenly and inconveniently relevant, gave the prosecutors more than they needed. Diane told me the phrase the assistant DA used in a preliminary meeting was remarkably well documented, and that Frank Guerrero had been asked if he would be available as an expert witness. He was available. Patricia was formally charged 8 weeks after that December night. 2 counts of conspiracy to commit financial fraud and 1 count of accessory to wire transfer fraud, connected to her guidance of Robert's use of the Callaway audit cycle. Her expensive lawyer filed a motion to suppress the Monica witness statement, which was denied. He filed another motion challenging the relevance of the 22-year-old termination record, which was also denied. Patricia, who had spent decades operating from the certainty that she was the most formidable person in any room she entered, was discovering that formidability has limits when the documentation is thorough. I was not present when she was charged. I did not need to be. Diane called me and told me, and I was at my desk, working, because I had gone back to work 2 weeks after that December night, and I had not stopped. And the work was good. It was something I had built myself. It was real. It was mine in a way that nothing Robert had touched could be, and it held me when other things didn't. I did not feel triumph when Diane told me about the charges. I want to be honest about that, because I think there is an expectation in stories like this that justice lands with a certain feeling, a cleanness, a closing of a circle feeling. What I felt was quieter, something close to completion, but without the fanfare I might have once imagined. The woman who had put my child outside in the December cold was being held accountable. That was enough. It didn't need to feel like a victory parade. It just needed to be true. The divorce was finalized 4 months after I filed. Robert cooperated, as he had said he would. The house stayed mine, my name, my deed, my mortgage, and now mine alone and without question. The asset freeze held until the court-ordered division was complete, and because the $200,000 was proven to have originated from fraud, both from our joint account and from Callaway, the court ordered that the Callaway portion be returned to the company and the household portion be restored to me, with interest. Robert's cooperation in the criminal proceedings against Patricia reduced his own criminal exposure to a negotiated plea on a single count of wire fraud, resulting in a suspended sentence, community service, and full restitution. His lawyer told Diane that Robert had wept in the attorney's office when the plea was accepted. I did not ask for more details than that. I had Zoe. I had the house. I had my mother 2 miles away. I had Diane and Frank, who had become, in the way that people who help you through extreme things sometimes do, something close to trusted friends. I had my job, which I returned to fully, and which had been held for me by a manager who called me during the proceedings and said, with a directness I will always appreciate, "Take what you need, your role is here, and we don't discuss your personal life unless you want to." I had not wanted to, but knowing the offer was on the table had mattered more than I can explain. And then, 6 months after that December night, something happened that I had not planned for and could not have predicted, and it shifted something in me that I had thought was already fully resolved. Monica called. I almost didn't answer. We had not spoken since the coffee shop meeting, since she had put the envelope and the USB drive on the table and said what she'd come to say. I had kept the appropriate distance, and yet something made me answer. The same instinct that had made me pick up her first call, the sense that Monica, for all the damage at the center of her connection to my life, was not a simple character in this story, and that simple dismissal of her would not be entirely honest. "I'm leaving the city," she said. "I got a job offer in Seattle. I wanted to call before I left." "Okay," I said. "Thank you for telling me." A pause. "How is she, Zoe?" I considered the question. It was the right question, which is part of why it surprised me. Not "how are you?" Not "how has everything turned out?" Zoe. The child she had never met, had only heard crying through a closed door that December night, whose blue lips she had not seen, but whose existence had apparently lodged itself in her conscience and stayed there. "She's wonderful," I said. "She got a dog." Monica laughed, a brief, real one. "Good," she said. Then, more quietly, "I'm sorry. I know I've said it, but I mean it more now than I did then. I was I was in something I didn't fully see the shape of until it was too late, and I know that doesn't give back anything. No, I said, it doesn't. I paused. But you made a choice when you could have made a different one. I haven't forgotten that. I hope you didn't have to work too hard to get to a good place, she said. I worked hard, I said. I'm in a good place. She said she hoped things went well. I said the same, meaning it at the level that it was true, which was a moderate and honest level. We hung up. I sat for a moment. Then I called Zoe in from the backyard where she was having a very serious conversation with the dog about why he should not eat the garden. And I held her for a minute. And she tolerated it with the distracted generosity of a child who has important dog-related matters to attend to. Patricia was convicted 7 months after she was charged, guilty on 2 of 3 counts. The third was reduced in a plea agreement that her lawyer negotiated after the first 2 became untenable. She was sentenced to 18 months and required to pay full restitution. Her lawyer stated in a press statement that she would appeal. Diane told me she had grounds on a procedural technicality that might reduce the sentence but would not change the conviction. She's going to want to fight it, Diane said. That's who she is. I know, I said. Let her fight. I did not attend the sentencing. I thought about it, and I decided it was not something I needed. I had needed the charges. I had needed the conviction. The sentencing was for the justice system, not for me. My justice had already happened, in smaller and more human moments, in the warmth of my kitchen, in the color returned to my daughter's face, in the sound of my mother's voice on the phone saying, "Zoe is fine, Eleanor. Come home." On the first anniversary of that December night, I did something I had planned quietly for weeks without telling anyone. I went and had the porch light replaced. Not because it had gone out again. I had replaced it in January and kept it meticulously maintained since, but because I wanted the act of it to mean something. I stood on my front porch and I put in the new bulb myself on a December evening when the air was cold and the neighborhood was quiet and the cul-de-sac was lit from the inside of every house, warm and ordinary. I screwed in the light. It came on. I stood in it for a moment. Zoe appeared at the front door. She had the dog with her, an enormous, ridiculous golden retriever named Captain, who had somehow quadrupled in size since we got him, and still believed he was a lapdog. She looked at me on the porch and said, "What are you doing?" "Fixing the light," I said. She considered this. It was already fixed. "Now it's more fixed," I said. She accepted that with the pragmatism of a 5-year-old who has learned that adults sometimes do things for reasons that are real, even if they're hard to explain. She held the door open. "Grandma made soup," she said. "She says it's ready." I looked at the porch light one more time. That steady, ordinary, warm light that I had made sure would never be dark again. Not in this house, not on my watch. Then I turned and walked inside. Captain immediately attempted to sit on my feet. My mother called from the kitchen that if I didn't come now, the soup would be too hot and I would have only myself to blame. Zoe was already running back to the kitchen, narrating something to the dog at high speed, her voice bright and unguarded and completely at home. I closed the front door behind me. The deadbolt turned with a clean, solid click. There are things you cannot predict about the hardest years of your life. You cannot predict which moment will be the one that breaks something loose. You cannot predict who will show up and who will fail you. You cannot predict the exact shape of what you'll build after. But I have learned this. The people who bet on your smallness, who count on you to be easy, to calm down, to accept less, to stay quiet, they are making a calculation based on who you were, not who you are capable of becoming. Patricia bet that I would calm down. Robert bet that I wouldn't look too closely. Both of them constructed their plans around a woman who would absorb and endure and eventually forgive her way back to manageable. They were not wrong about who I had been. They were catastrophically wrong about who I became. On a December night, when I found my child outside in the cold and understood with a clarity I will never lose what I was willing to fight for. I fought, I won. And on the nights when Zoe falls asleep against me on the sofa, and the dog is across my feet, and my mother is in the kitchen making something warm, and the porch light is on, steady, deliberate, mine, I know that the woman who came home that night, the woman who dropped her suitcase and ran toward a sound in the dark, made every right choice when it counted. She held when she needed to hold. She moved when it was time to move. And she never, not once, calmed down.